So, Boris Johnson has had a majority for less than 2 weeks, and in this time, he has done a lot of truly horrible things. And it's things that we've allowed and it's things that we've permitted because, by and large, we voted Conservative. The two things I want to talk about today are the attack on disabled people and the attack on workers' rights. Effectively, getting rid of workers' rights, which is what practically every Conservative MP has just voted for. First and foremost, the attack on disabled people. Now, we've had stories and people coming forward for the last few years saying that they were declared not fit for work by their GP, by a medical professional. And the job centre, the DWP, have overruled that. Now, I'm not saying that there's no one working for Department of Work and Pensions who's never worked in any kind of medical field, but they absolutely do not have the authority to overturn a GP's decision. By and large, they don't know the difference between polio and MS. They don't know the difference between chronic back pain and arthritis. And yet, they have the authority, they have given themselves the authority to dismiss what doctors are saying. And because of this, we've had numerous reports of people who have been declared fit for work, completely contradictory to what their doctors have said, and as a result, they have either died doing a job they should never have been doing because they weren't fit to work, or have starved to death because their benefits have been stopped. The start of this month, legislation was put through to effectively stop the DWP from making these decisions. Now, these decisions weren't entirely done by the DWP. Sometimes they were outsourced, but they were never outsourced to medical professionals. These were always independent bodies who have no medical authority whatsoever, no medical qualifications, nada. And yet these people were making decisions that contradicted medical professionals. And as I said, at the start of the month, legislation was put through to try and stop that. The first day back, Boris Johnson and his loathsome cabinet of repulsive individuals did away with that completely. And in fact, they've gone one step further. They've now given the DWP the authority to write to GPs and say, don't even bother writing the sick note. This is a repulsive, loathsome attack on people who are disabled in this country. Whether that they're just injured and they need time off, or whether they actually have a disability. Boris Johnson, the people that this country voted, the person that this country voted for, has given authority to the DWP, who have proven time and time again to make the wrong decisions, to now just cut out the middleman and say directly to your doctor, don't write that sick note, we're not going to pay attention to it either way, don't waste your time. That's what Conservatives did on the first day back. Now, workers' rights. This one gets a little more complicated because it's tied up in the Brexit proposal that Johnson has. I made my opinion on Theresa May's Brexit deal very clear, and Boris Johnson's deal is so much worse. But where most people will just go, okay, well, it's Brexit, we're leaving the EU, we're leaving the EU. Okay, Boris Johnson has just taken workers' rights and thrown them in the garbage. Now, I've said on this channel before, there's a difference between a legal promise and a political promise. And the political promise this year was determined by the courts, doesn't matter. It's not worth the paper it's written. It's not written on paper, but it doesn't matter at all. Which is why Boris keeps coming out with 40 new hospitals. In fact, Boris and Matt Hancock keep coming out with 40 new hospitals, 50,000 new nurses. It's not going to happen. They know it's not going to happen, but they are continuously coming out with this lie. And now we have the situation where almost every single Conservative member of Parliament, including the Member of Parliament for Dover and Deal, Natalie Elphrick, wife of alleged rapist Charlie Elphrick, voted for Boris Johnson's Brexit deal. They voted for this deal that gets rid of workers' rights. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because I had a conversation with a friend yesterday, and his understanding of workers' rights, unfortunately, is all too common, and it's misguided. He brought up 0-hour contracts, saying that surely the EU should have stepped in and done something because 0-hour contracts clearly must violate workers' rights. First and foremost, the EU is not going to step in because they are not a government. We don't pay this membership fee to have a second government. For workers' rights, we have protections because in European law, with the European Court of Justice, we default to their working rights because we don't technically have a lot of these laws on our books. As I said in a previous video, there are a number of laws that aren't actually anywhere in existence in the English judiciary system, but these laws are incredibly important because they protect you and me. They protect workers. Now, a 0-hour contract is a horrible loophole, but unfortunately, if you sign up to a 0-hour contract, that's what you've signed up to. Now, I'm not justifying it. If you need work and that's the only work available, you're obviously going to go for that. It is a system that has been bred and encouraged by a Conservative government that pisses on the poor at every chance they get. Not necessarily workers' rights. But workers' rights come into effect when you have a dispute with your company. I have an example with this. I work in social care. I've worked in social care for a long time, and I have friends who've worked in it even longer. A friend of mine was doing numerous day shifts. They were 14 and a half hours back to back with sleep-ins, breaking them up. So effectively, he came in on the Monday and he was there for the entire week. Now, the home that he was in, and if you were a sleep-in, if you don't know anything about care work, if you're labelled as a sleep-in, you are sleeping at the care home. If nothing happens, you sleep the whole night, kind of. You're still at work and that's still in the back of your head, so you don't really get a good night's sleep. But if something does happen, you are expected to get up and deal with it. Some homes don't have wake night staff, they just have sleep-ins. Depends on the home, but the home my friend was working in, he was a sleep-in, and every single night he had to get up and do stuff. He was running on about 5 hours sleep for the entire week. He got injured. He should have never been rotated to do those hours. He should never have been forced to do those hours. That was a clear violation of his workers' rights, but he was told if he didn't do them, he'd lose his job. He was severely injured as a result of being, quite frankly, put in that position, but also incredibly overworked. He should have never been in the position where he got seriously injured. And then the company turned around and blamed him for it. Him being fairly adverse on laws, or at least enough of a bit of a git to actually do the research into this, he took the company to court. And he absolutely won because of European Court of Justice laws. Workers' rights. They don't exist. These particular laws don't exist in British law, but they absolutely exist in European law because it's protective for the workers. Those protections that you and I have now been voted away by the Conservatives. If you genuinely think that Boris Johnson is going to keep these protections that he's just taken out of legal legislation and put them into a political promise, I'm sorry, but you're a bit of a fucking moron. Boris Johnson is a disgusting scumbag. And yet, we voted for him. The demographics, the age demographics are really interesting to go into, but essentially that's what happens. And everyone who voted Conservative for Brexit, you voted to get rid of your workers' rights. You voted for this loathsome attack on disabled people across the country. That's what we have to finish off the year. I would love to say that I don't think anything else horrible is going to happen in this country because of this Conservative government for the rest of this year, but honestly, it's Boris Johnson. This is a man who found out his wife had cancer and that day left her and the kid. Bring on 2020.